The family of a local teenager says she never would have left home without calling.
Just praying for the best. I want my daughter home, man. And if she can't come home, I just want to know where she's at.
These posters around the towns of Livermore and Jay beg anyone with information to come forward. Posters that Richard puts up every spring, never losing hope.
Tell me what happened to my daughter. Just look me in the eyes so I can see her.
An arrest in a nearly 4-decade-old cold case thanks to cutting-edge DNA technology. The arrest happening exactly 39 years to the day
when Parabon Nanolabs used that sample to create 3D models of the suspected killer's face.
It's heartbreaking. We miss her, and we're going to find her. We're going to keep looking till we do.
It's like a never-ending nightmare. It doesn't end. It keeps returning and coming back.
Welcome back to Located Lost. This is our first episode of Season 2. Tonight, we talk to Sarah Turney, whose sister Alyssa Turney went missing May 17th, 2001.
Hello.
Hello, Sarah.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. It's great to talk to you.
Oh, thanks. You too.
So I'm here with Jeff also.
Hello.
Hi, Jeff.
How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Oh, pretty good.
So, Sarah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got started into this endeavor that you've gone into?
Sure. My name is Sarah Turney, and the reason I'm in podcasting in the true crime community is because of my sister, Alyssa Turney, who went missing in 2001 when she was 17.
How did you decide to use podcasting as a platform to try to reach people about this case?
So Alyssa's case came to the point where essentially there was no movement. I was being told that the case was going to be presented for prosecution to the county, and it had been 6 months with really no word. And I spent years talking to other content creators, people on YouTube, people in podcasting, of course, and just trying to share her story that way. But after 6 months of really no movement, I wanted to step it up a notch and make my own content. So that's really where Voices for Justice, my podcast, comes from, is just a last stitch effort to, tell Alyssa's story in a very complete way that had never been told before.
And I noticed too that on your website you'd mentioned that was kind of like, it's a different perspective of it too. That's kind of what you're aiming for, is like people, there's a more sympathetic side to it. The family side isn't necessarily being shown in some of these situations, right?
Of course. I mean, no one's going to tell a story like a family member would. And yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it, is I do feel like that is a piece that is missing out of the true crime community, especially in podcasting, is you don't really see a lot of family members going out there and making their own, content about their missing loved one or murdered loved one, whatever it might be. So I thought, there's a space in the market for it. It's a story I really want to tell. I need help, in terms of the police and kind of pushing things along. So all of those puzzle pieces really just fit together. And, once I got my hands on, Alyssa's pretty much entire case file, my goodness, there's like 3,000 pages, and I started reading through it.
Oh, my word.
Yeah, I knew, more and more. It just solidified it for me. I was like, I have to do this.
And that's the thing, right? Your sincerity and your relationship to this case, it kind of draws the listeners in. I know it drew me in.
Oh, thank you. I hope so.
And I've got to say too, your website is very clean. It looks very nice, and your blog is very compelling too. Actually, I got to the what was it called, the part 2 of the brainwashing, and I was like, oh, where's the third one? Oh, the third one's not here yet. Like it's really engaging.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, the blog is definitely a work in progress. I need to go back and update that specific post because There's so much. The blog is really where I started telling my own story, you know, but unfortunately blogs just aren't as popular as they used to be. So I, you know, switched up to a medium that I thought more people would see.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. All right. So why don't you begin telling us a story about what happened to your sister, and we'll get into that if you wouldn't mind.
Perfect. Yeah, there's so many rabbit holes in this story, so I'll just stick to a very high-level overview. So, I mean, essentially, you know, Alyssa went missing on May 17th, 2001. She was 17 and I was 12. It was the last day of her junior year in high school. I was gone all day at a water park for the last day of 7th grade. And, you know, a lot of the story from this day does come from our father, so that's something to keep in mind. But essentially, Alyssa is picked up early out of school by our father. It was a half day anyway, and, you know, there's a lot of speculation as to why he picked her up, and we don't really know why for sure. But before Alyssa gets into his truck to leave with him, she stops in her boyfriend's shop class and says, you know, see you later. And she also runs into a friend, Jessica, who she says, you know, I'll see you later as well. She had plans that night. She was going to go to graduation as well as a party. But, you know, our father picks her up, and according to him, they go grab some lunch. He doesn't know where. He doesn't know if they ate there or took it home. But at some point, they come back home, get in a fight about Alyssa wanting more freedom over the summer. And then our father leaves her. He, you know, just leaves her to cool off. He goes and runs some errands for kind of an unspecified time. The timeline is just so fuzzy due to the investigation. But he leaves Alyssa and then eventually comes to pick me up. I, you know, get back from school and my father's not there, so I go walk to a friend's house, which was, you know, totally normal for me. And eventually he does come pick me up. I get into his truck and he says, Sarah, you know, your sister's not answering, will you try to give her a call? So I give her a call. There's no answer. We go back to the house. It's probably about a 10-minute drive. And I enter her room first. And to the left is a, you know, her dresser with a cell phone and a note that said, you know, something to the effect of, Dad and Sarah, when you dropped me off at school today, I decided I really am going to California. Sarah, you said you wanted me gone. Now you have it. Dad, that's why I saved my money. I took $300 from you, Alyssa. You know, and on the ground were, yeah, it's intense. And on the ground was what looked like the contents of her backpack, which I noticed right away because her room was always so neat. But yeah, essentially we have this runaway note of sorts. So our father calls the police around 11 o'clock that night and says, my daughter, who is a marijuana user, is mad at me and left to her aunt's house in California. So that elicited no search from the police. So really nothing happened, which is why that timeline is so fuzzy, right? Because no one was interviewed until there was a break in the case. In 2006, there was a gentleman who confessed to killing Alyssa. You know, this guy wrote a detective and said, I'm going to make you, you know, famous. I'm a serial killer. And the police
Now, this is Thomas Heimer?
This is Thomas Heimer, yeah. So he confessed to killing, I think, 22 women, including J.C. Lee Dugard, who was found alive.
Right.
So, you know, the police check it out and they determine pretty quickly that this guy is not telling the truth. The guy even comes out and admits, like, I think I was wrong. I don't think it was Alyssa. It must have been some other girl. But what this does is spark the first investigation to Alyssa's case. My goodness, you know, thank goodness. And, pretty quickly, you know, they start to interview family and friends, and a lot of people are pointing fingers at our father. You know, he was strange. There was a lot of odd behavior, things I didn't know about. But the police look into it. Our father is pretty much uncooperative. He won't come down for a formal interview. He won't give DNA. He won't provide any surveillance video and audio from the time she went missing, which we can get into all the surveillance later. Because there's a lot. But yeah, they look at all this, they see that my father's being uncooperative, and they want these items from him, so they get a search warrant and they come raid our home, and they find a ton of video and a ton of audio, but they also find, you know, the largest pipe bomb bust in Phoenix history. There's 26 pipe bombs with a plan to use all of them. So he goes to yes, and this is the high level overview. I promise it's the high level overview.
I know. I've heard every episode.
But so yeah,
Multiple times.
Well, thank you. Oh my gosh, you're so sweet. he goes to prison for 10 years, and during this time, I come around because, before this, I don't believe my father could have done it, even for years after he went to prison. But eventually I come around and I go to the police and say, I see what you see, if with my father being the only person of interest, how can I help get these answers for you? We start working together, and they tell me, they say, Sarah, when your father gets out of prison in 2017, we're going to arrest him for the murder of your sister. We don't want to do it while he's in prison because then he'll be able to combine sentences. And I'm in my mid-20s at this point or whatever, so I'm thinking, great, it's all handled, everything's going to be taken care of, I don't need to do anything, so I don't.
Right.
But my father gets out of prison and they don't arrest him. And so I go and ask them what happened, and they say, we've changed our mind. We're not going to do it without a witness or without a body, and we suggest you get media exposure. So that's when I started getting media and going on this crazy mission. And, I go back to them in January of 2019 and say, I have all this media. What's going on? How can we get this figured out? And they basically say, we don't care about your media. We don't care about your petitions. We're not going to do this. We need a witness. We need a body. And I say, good luck explaining this to the world, because now people are interested in this case, and you're going to have to explain why there's been no action, when the evidence seems so apparent. And
right, they've made their own monster by telling you to let everyone know about it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Go tell the world about it, get this media. And I'm like, hey guys, I got it. And they're like, yeah, just kidding. We don't really care.
Yeah.
But a week later, of course, I get this email. Excuse me. A week later, of course, I get this email that says, just kidding, we've changed our minds. We're going to go ahead and present this case for prosecution. And, that was January of 2019. And here we are near the end of 2020, and there's still no answer. So that, again, I promise that is the very high level overview.
Yeah, that was high level.
Yeah. There's so much to go over.
How many people follow you on social media right now?
It depends on the platform. It ranges. I think the lowest might be Twitter at under 20,000, and the highest is TikTok at almost 1 million.
Wow. Well, I can guarantee we'll get you at least 2 more people, so.
At least 2 more.
That'll be good.
I'll take all the people I can get.
All right, good. So, to go back to when your father picked you up at school, what time was, at your friend's house, what time was that? And what time did he pick up Alyssa?
So I believe he picked up Alyssa around 11, but there's no records. When the police went back, finally 7 years after she disappeared, they went to the school, and the school said, sorry, we don't keep records that long. And as far as what time I was picked up, I don't really know, because I wasn't interviewed by police until 7 years later either. So I just know it was sometime after school.
He bought a duplicate truck, right? After he went missing? Truck that matched the pickup that he had?
Yes. So one of the many interesting facets in this story is the fact that my father quickly sold his truck after Alyssa went missing, but he replaced it with this, nearly identical truck and told no one. No one in the family had any idea until the police told us so many years later.
So you didn't even notice it was a different truck? You just thought it was the same pickup he always had?
Yeah. I mean, especially I'm 12 years old. I think it's pretty easy to trick a 12-year-old girl about a truck. I don't know. And I also just didn't care, if we're being honest.
And there's something else important to mention for listeners too, is that he was a former sheriff's deputy, right? It was only for a couple years, but there's stuff here that he would know about, things to do and not to do, right? With the missing persons thing, he made it seem like it was no big deal, like, she ran away, but she told us where, and that's not going to elicit much of a response out of the police.
Exactly. As former law enforcement, he would understand the protocol for a missing child that's in danger versus the protocol for a runaway teenager who's on drugs. Those are going to elicit 2 totally different responses, and he would know that.
Growing up as a latchkey kid in a small town in Maine, I always assumed I was safe. After all, unless it makes national news, murder isn't something people talk about around here. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Murder, She Told is a true crime podcast featuring crime stories, unsolved murders and missing persons, and baffling cold cases from my home state of Maine, New England, and small towns across America. These are the crime stories your hometown doesn't want to talk about, the mysteries buried deep in the newspaper archives of local American history. These are the homicides you've probably never heard of before. Through detailed storytelling and connections with family, friends, and investigators closest to the case, Murder, She Told will hit home for any true crime fan, whether you're from Maine or from away. Visit murdershetold.com to suggest your hometown crime story, and subscribe now wherever you get your favorite podcasts. I'm Kristen Seavey, and this is Murder, She Told.
So what was life like with your father growing up with Alyssa and your dad?
So life for me was totally different than it was for Alyssa. I was, for lack of a better term, and as much as I hate using this term, I was pretty much the golden child. I did no wrong in my father's eyes, and I was allowed to do whatever I wanted. And I mean that seriously. I went to school when I wanted. I woke up when I wanted. I would stay at friends' houses whenever I wanted for, days and days at a time. I just basically had no rules. And my father would always tell me, well, you're smart and you make good decisions. And, thank goodness I never really got into trouble, though I certainly should have. But yeah, so I had complete freedom, and my father was kind of like my best friend. You know what I mean? He would give me rides everywhere I wanted to go. He would buy me pretty much whatever I wanted, even when we didn't have that much money. I was just spoiled rotten.
And how was that different for Alyssa?
So Alyssa had really, really strict rules. He, prevented her from doing a lot of things. He was always wondering about her friends. He even made a contract between himself and one of her friend's parents in order for her to spend the night for her friend's birthday. Things like boys couldn't come over, and they would be I think it was something like they would be in bed by a certain time. Just really, really intense. He would also watch her. This is where the surveillance comes in, of course, is we had exterior cameras on the house, which, was no big deal. I felt like really cool and really privileged to have security cameras. But he also had a hidden camera inside of our living room vent that was there just to watch Alyssa. This is in addition to a passive recording system on our home phone that recorded every single phone call going in and going out. That was there since before either of us were born. We walked into our house and it was there essentially.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And in addition to this, there were, of course, more contracts that get scarier. He made Alyssa sign things like, I've never been sexually abused by my father. I've never been physically abused. And some really graphic sexual things that are just really gross. But yeah, he exhibited completely different behavior over Alyssa.
What's interesting is that he recorded everything, videotaped it, audio on phone calls. Yeah, how much video and audio do we have from the day that she went missing?
Exactly. We have nothing from the day she went missing.
But you've got years and years of it otherwise, right?
Oh, yeah. The police, when they raided the home, they took all the audio tapes, and there are tapes of us calling Blockbuster in the 90s. There's, tapes that go back to the 70s. Just these, silly conversations that you wouldn't feel that are important to keep. But, everything from Alyssa is gone. Even, of course, after a week after Alyssa went missing, there was a phone call that came into our house from a payphone in Riverside, California. And our father says that was Alyssa, but, the recording system didn't catch it. So it's really, really suspicious, to say the least.
Absolutely.
How was you and Alyssa's relationship together with you, being the golden child and her having a very strict regiment? Did you guys get along still with that?
It caused contention for sure. I would say we had a pretty typical sister relationship in terms of fighting, right? We would go into each other's rooms, and that would upset each other. I would steal her clothes and all those things. I was the most annoying little sister. I will just say it outright. I wanted
typical.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to be just like her, so I would go in her room and steal things. I would, there was one time where she snuck a boy into the house, and I was like, I won't tell Dad, but I get something out of your room. Like, I was not cool. But of course, there's all those really sweet moments that we had, just like all sisters do, where she's doing my hair and doing my nails and helping me dress and all those things. So I would call it pretty typical, but Alyssa did have the weight of being my only mother figure. Our mother passed away in 1993 when we were both very, very young. And so she shouldered that responsibility, not only for me, but, in the household in general, in terms of cooking and keeping things clean. And so I think there was a little bit of extra pressure and stress that caused us to fight a little bit more.
Right. Yeah. And you'd have to understand that.
One thing that really brought me into this, your podcast, is the episode where you have a video of, I believe you guys were out camping, and Alyssa is in the background. It says, Sarah, Dad's a pervert. Like, to hear that on that podcast just blew me away. Like, that's really what sucked me in, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I try to use as much real audio and video as possible in, when I tell this story, because I think it just speaks for itself. But of course, in making the podcast, I went through all of our home videos, which was so crazy. And, there's this just normal video of us camping or whatever. Him and Alyssa seem to have some type of stress between each other. Alyssa seems pissed off or whatever. And then I'm filming. I'm literally like 8 years old, and my dad's like, turn off the camera. And I'm like, no, I want to film me. Because I did whatever I wanted. So when he told me no, I was like, yeah, right. Please, I'm going to keep going. But I'm filming, and Alyssa's like, Sarah. And I'm like, huh? And, she says, Dad's a pervert. And my dad's like, turn off the camera, turn off the camera. And he eventually gets it back from me, and he goes, Alyssa's a stupid moron. And I just skip away because I'm 8 and I don't know what's going on. I'm just like, that's silly. And I walk away.
So Alyssa would have been 13 at the time. Is that right?
I think according to the timestamp, she was 12, actually.
Oh, okay. So like what kid that age is going to say something like that?
Exactly, especially a 12-year-old. To even bring up that word, especially with your male parent, seems very awkward and uncomfortable, unless, of course, she reported that she was being sexually abused. So that makes total sense in that aspect.
Some of the footage that I saw, and this was just from the website, because I unfortunately haven't listened to your podcast, but from the website, some of the videos of the family stuff seemed somewhat innocuous at first. Just him recording her when she's at work. I was like, something about it being like her first day, just recording is like, okay, that's something I might do for my daughter, just being kind of a weirdo. But then after hearing some of him interviewing friends and friends' families and the contracts, and it was stated somewhere that it seemed more like a jealous sort of boyfriend relationship, and that seems to make a lot more sense, and it gets really creepy at that point.
I totally agree. You can isolate any of these videos and not know the story and think, this is probably nothing. But once you put it all together, it really does tell a story and becomes kind of this reference information. It's kind of like backup. It's almost proof, if you will. When Alyssa writes these letters to her friends talking about how she feels our father's too overbearing, and then you see this video of him recording her, you're like, oh, well, that makes sense.
Right. It's creepy as hell.
Yeah, that's been the common feedback.
Now, how many siblings do you have?
So technically 6 if you count the sister I never knew about, which is a rabbit hole all in itself.
Oh, geez.
Yes.
Now, how do they feel about this podcast? And are they willing to come onto the podcast and talk to you about the case?
No, they don't wish to be on the podcast. We all deal with things differently, and I try to respect how they feel and their actions as much as possible, but none of them wish to be involved in the podcast.
But do they at least support you in what you're doing?
You know, I wish I could say that they do, but unfortunately they don't. This entire case and this pursuit, that the police put me on to get media has essentially ripped me and my siblings apart.
Oh, wow. Sorry to hear that.
No, that's okay. I mean, it's about Alyssa for me.
Well, and that's the thing. The other thing about you is you're so strong. You face your father. There's recordings of you talking to him, I believe, while he's at prison, correct? And asking him questions, like tough questions, and calling him out on things. Like, you're a tough girl. You go against Phoenix PD and you question them on the things that they're doing. I've got a tremendous amount of respect for you, Sarah.
Oh, thank you so much. That was actually when he was out of prison, face to face. But yeah, it's been crazy. But yeah, I mean, I think people will do funny things when you have to. Like, you'd be surprised what you can accomplish when you're backed into a corner and have no other options.
But now, you didn't always believe that your father was guilty of this either, though, right? There was a long while there.
Oh, yeah.
Where, daddy's girl sort of thing, right?
Exactly. Way too long. It took me way too long to come around. I mean, my goodness, it's probably been about 5 years that I believed that my father did this, and Alyssa's been missing for 19 years. So I spent a lot of time thinking he was innocent.
Right. Jeez. How did that message from your sister, did that seem like it was from her genuinely? Did you have any doubts then when you heard that, you wanted me to leave, so I'm leaving?
No, I mean, it looked like Alyssa's handwriting, and it was confirmed that it was hers, and I don't think I thought a lot of it, especially that day. You know what I mean? As a 12-year-old who has seen my sister fight with her dad all the time, I was like, oh, she's mad, she'll be back. So I don't think, that day I took a lot of interest in the note or analyzed it at all. I mean, my goodness, if I could go back, I wish I would or could, but yeah, I mean, even today, like, that part of the note seems a little out of place for me. It seems like a very shallow reason to be leaving.
Right.
Like, out of all the reasons for her to leave our household, I don't think it was the fact that me and her fought. I think that there were, better reasons for her to get out. Exactly. And the whole note, like, you can sit there and deconstruct it, and it just doesn't make sense, right? Dad, that's why I saved my money. She didn't take her money. There was $1,800 in her bank account that was never touched, and the bank was less than a quarter mile from our house. There would have been no reason for her to not get that money out.
Right, and there was nothing that was taken. Like, her cell phone was still there. Like, there was just a couple articles of clothing that was missing. Right, that's all that they could tell.
According to my father, there were only a few items of clothing missing, but when I went in there, because, after she was gone, and especially when we moved pretty quickly after, I, of course, went in there and, all these clothes are mine now, and I want to save everything, and
right.
I wore her clothes as I felt, I think it made me feel closer to her, but that's all according to my father. So when I went in there and started taking stuff, I didn't see anything gone. Her favorite jewelry was still there. Her favorite makeup was still there. Pretty much everything. Not even a hairbrush was taken.
Right. And what girl that age is not going to go with those things?
Especially when you have, hair down to, the middle of your back, like Alyssa. Her hair, like, she cared so much about her hair, and it was so pretty, and she's been not take a hairbrush is really crazy to me.
And also with her, like, she was really close with quite a few people, right? She wasn't like an outsider. She was really close with quite a few people, like even within your own family, right? Like, she would have let someone know.
Absolutely. She had a steady boyfriend that she cared for a lot, that she spoke to every day. She had best friends. She was really close to our brother John. She would have reached out to someone, is what every single person in this case says.
Right, and her boyfriend didn't he try to convince him that she was actually messing around on him to try and get them to break up?
Yes. So there were some fights that were possibly orchestrated by our father. I believe that actually the police proved that, but our father would go to her boyfriend and say, hey, Alyssa's cheating on you, which is just insane. And it would spark, of course, these fights between Alyssa and her boyfriend in just really unnecessary things. You know, one of the only things my father sent to the police when they first started investigating in 2008 was a video of Alyssa getting in a fight with her boyfriend, and another video of Alyssa making out with a different guy on our couch. So
how convenient.
Exactly. He sent just the weirdest pieces of evidence, and in my opinion, he certainly tried to make it look like her boyfriend was involved. He said he was abusive, which I can find no one else in this entire world that can confirm that her boyfriend was abusive. And just, yeah, it's really sad. It's really sad what happened with her boyfriend, and I feel really, really bad for him.
Yeah. Now, wasn't there something with your uncle, I believe, had stayed with you for a little bit and was watching a videotape, popped something in, and then saw what he believed to be Alyssa on the videotape?
Yes. So it was my cousin David, who was living with us for a little bit. He finds a VHS hand labeled, because, you know, like back in the day, everybody would take a VCR and record. It is, in fact, a video of Alyssa and one of her friends naked from the waist up, laying on our couch with a newspaper over their faces, just laying there motionless.
How bizarre.
Yeah.
So it was Rhett's girlfriend that had gone on a trip one time with your father, and some weird things happened on that trip.
Yeah, so it was his friend, essentially, and my father hired this girl, paid her, I don't know what amount of money, to drive him up north for a few hours. He said he was too sick to drive himself and, enlist the help of this woman. And while they're driving up, you know, this is in the age where I think not everyone had a cell phone, so only my father had a cell phone, not this girl. And they're driving up north, and my father's phone is getting a ton of phone calls. And she's like, "What's that?" And he goes, "Well, you know, my son is scared that you might rob me. He's just being silly." And she's like, "Okay, weird, right?" And he's like recording her the whole time. Apparently, it's a very odd story. But they get to this hotel to stay at overnight because it was a long trip. And he says, "Oh, bummer, you know, they only have one room available. Looks like we'll have to share." And she's like, "Well, you know, that's kind of weird," and goes to the front desk, and they're like, "No, ma'am, like there's plenty of rooms. We can get you your own separate room." And so she tries to play it cool, and she's like, "Yeah, you know, I went to them, and thank goodness they had a room." And my father kind of gets upset, and he, you know, pulls out his audio recorder and starts asking her, "Did I make you uncomfortable? Did I say anything that would make you, you know, uncomfortable?" Something to that effect. And it's just really weird. And again, my dad keeps getting all these phone calls from my brother. So nothing really happens that night, thank goodness. They drive back home the next day, and this friend talks to my brother, and she's like, "You really thought I was going to like rob your dad?" And he goes, "No, I think my dad killed my sister, and I was afraid he was going to do the same thing to you."
Oh, geez.
Wow. Yeah. Unbelievable. So to get into your father mentally, I guess, what is his mental state, or what was his mental state? I know he had thought that people were following him. The Union was out to try to kill him or something. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, he had always been paranoid my whole life. But, you know, he's ex-law enforcement and ex-military, so I always thought it was because of that. He was kind of like that stereotypical ex-military character you might see on a TV show, just kind of paranoid, and you're like, okay, he's quirky or whatever. But of course, it goes a lot deeper than that. He basically took this argument he had with this electrical union that he worked for. You know, this is true. He worked for this electrical union. He did report unsafe working practices about having to jump on river rocks to get across a river, I believe was the issue. But this causes some contention among his coworkers. You know, there's some apparently harassing phone calls, things like that, which, you know, I'm not going to say I don't believe. You know, these things happen. There are whole movies dedicated to union workplace violence. We know that these things happen. And I'm not debating unions one way or the other, but I'm just saying, I think this kind of contention between his coworkers and this union turned into this greater paranoia inside of his mind, to the point where he thought that they were, you know, scheming for decades and decades to get back at him. one of the things the police found in the home was, of course, all those bombs, and then this manifesto to use it, this 98-page document where he outlines how he believed, that the Union was getting revenge on him by killing Alyssa, that they sent 2 assassins to kill Alyssa. And in return, my dad had to kill those 2 assassins and build all these bombs to blow up the building to get revenge. So it's a very long, complicated story, but it's a huge point in this case because it sent him to prison for 10 years.
Oh, and it also clearly proves that he is not stable.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that that's pretty unstable to think that something that grandiose is happening to you, and that you have to think about, like, what would all of those moving pieces really look like if those stories were true? That is a huge, grand
jumping
conspiracy.
Over some rocks.
Exactly. Over, you saying that they had some OSHA violations back in the 70s.
Right.
I just don't think so.
Now, there were like 20 plus statements against him, correct? Or along that lines of statements about his potential abuse, and even a letter from Alyssa as well.
Yes, there are so many people that have come forward to speak about this, and Alyssa alludes to it in a few of her letters. But this started really early. I think one of the scariest points about this abuse is that Alyssa, at 9 years old, went to her teacher, which was also the woman that my father was dating, and said, "I'm having sex with my dad," which obviously is a huge red flag, and unfortunately it wasn't reported.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, I mean, as she grew up, and she told people, of course. And when they went back and they interviewed friends and family, there were dozens of people that came forward and said that, she told me that he was touching her. She told me about this story where he tried something with her. It's really sad because so many people knew. I mean, my goodness, even my father called Child Protective Services and the police himself and said, "My daughter is going to call and lie and say that I'm sexually abusing her." He tried to get her arrested for being bisexual. It's just, it's really insane. So many people knew.
Now, what about your mom's sisters, or something happened with them as well with your father, Mike?
Yes. So while my mother was dying, our father sexually assaulted our mother's sister. He asked her to marry him and move in and be our new mother and his new wife. And it's really disgusting and really scary. And there's even speculation around my mother's death and whether or not he could be involved. Again.
Absolutely. It also shows a pattern of the type of person your father is and was.
Oh, exactly. There's a very long history of him sexually assaulting women.
Jeez. No, there were 2 detectives that were working on this, right, for a very long time.
Yes, Detective Summershoe and Detective Anderson worked on this case for almost 10 years. And, I do believe that they worked it to the best of their ability. By no means is the investigation perfect. I don't think a perfect investigation exists. But that I have 3,000 pages of their work. They worked very, very hard on this case.
Right. And they were just dropped just before he was released, correct?
Yes, that's another very strange aspect of this case is, shortly before my father went prison, both detectives were reassigned. Specifically, one was reassigned, I think, a week before he got out of prison. And I was told the entire cold case unit is being dissolved. No one's working on cases that are older than a year. And I'm like, I don't know things. Okay, sounds legit to me.
Oh, man.
But yeah, of course, I later find out that specifically Detective Summershoe wasn't reassigned from his cases. He was just reassigned from Alyssa's. I mean, I guess I can't confirm that he kept at least 2 of his cases and not Alyssa's.
That seems really odd.
I think so. Yeah, and they've still never explained to me why I was told that the entire cold case unit was being dissolved, why I was told that, Detective Summershoe was getting all new cases or not working on them at all. They've never explained that to me.
So where's the case at this point? Are they going to go forward with the prosecution, or are they still just kind of hoping that it goes away? I don't know.
So right now, Maricopa County is deciding whether or not they're going to press charges against our father for Alyssa's murder. It's been 19 months, and I really hope to hear soon, but who knows? I mean, my goodness, it's also an election year, so the Maricopa County prosecutor is up for election, so who knows what that's going to look like.
And they said that, you know, they needed a body, but there have been cases in your county where they've tried people without a body, right?
Oh, yes, countless cases. I haven't looked back into it for a long time, but I want to say that the first case prosecuted in Maricopa County with no body was like in the 1950s.
And what about more recently? Do you know when the or more recent one, I should say?
Yes, more recently, Jamie Lady and I believe Christine Mustafa. I don't think that they ever recovered her body, but those were two cases where they had a ton of circumstantial evidence. They were not able to locate a body, yet they won on the murder charges. I mean, there's countless cases. The no body, no case is not a thing. I think it's a tagline that, dramatic, true crime TV shows have put out there, but that's not real in the justice system. A body, of course, helps. I would love to have her body for a variety of reasons, but you don't need it to move forward. And if they needed it so much, they probably should have looked for it, which they have continuously refused to do, even when I offer them free resources.
Yeah, there seems to be, from my perspective, enough to jump on this, even from the limited amount of information that I have about the case. Like, it all seems like it's right there.
I agree, and it's been there. As far as I know, there was no new evidence obtained between them telling me we're absolutely not going to do this without a witness or a body, and a week later when they said, just kidding, we don't need those things anymore. As far as I know, nothing new was obtained. So what the holdup is, I really don't know.
The whole thing is so unbelievable.
It is stranger than fiction, for sure.
Now, do you believe there's any chance that your father's not involved?
At this point, no. Especially, when I confronted him in person and he said, come to the deathbed and I'll give you all the honest answers you want to hear, or I'll confess to everything if the state gives me lethal injection within 10 days of that confession. For me, that really, really solidified it all. I mean, that erased any doubt in my mind that he could not be involved.
Right. That was weird, to say the least. That, holy cow. There was also something about he was willing to testify for, or make a formal statement for the police, right? If there was a live television there, and he had some other sort of demands, right?
Yes. So before he's released from prison, the chief of the Phoenix Police Department writes my father a letter while he's still in prison and says, we believe that you have information that could help solve your daughter's case. Will you please talk to us? And he responds with this 6-page letter, talking about his life and whatnot, but also outlining these terms. At the end, he finally says, okay, I will interview with you. If it's live on CNN, if everyone is given polygraph tests from independent polygraph testers from Canada, and he wanted to interview and have these tests performed on his entire family, the detectives from Melissa's case, John Walsh from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the ATF, the judge in his bomb case, all these really ridiculous stipulations. But he says, at that point, then yes, you can interview me after I interview all of these people. And of course, I don't even think the police ever wrote back. I think they were just like, okay, he's clearly not interested in talking.
Right. Oh my word.
And there's so much more we could still get into, but obviously time's run out at this point. I know you even got a hold of Thomas Heimlich. Got his name.
Heimer,
thank you. Heimlich is a procedure, I believe.
They gets rid of chicken in your throat.
Right. You even confronted Thomas Heimer and try to make contact with him and talk back and forth, right?
I did, yes. So I wrote him a series of letters. He wrote back. We talked on the phone one time. We were ready to set up this interview. And then all of a sudden he's gone and doesn't want to talk anymore. So that's still kind of pending. I actually got a call from him about a week and a half ago that I missed. So it looks like he's still interested in talking and telling his story. But, you know, he says essentially that there's a reason why he picked Alyssa. It was not by chance, and that he wants to tell me the whole story. So hopefully we will hear that story.
Oh, no kidding.
All right, is there anything else you want to tell us, Sarah, before we let you go?
Where can people find you in your story? What sort of social media would you like to let the people know about?
Sure, yeah. And of course, we could go on for hours and hours and hours, but I think you guys did a great job with your questions, so thank you. But yeah, if you guys are interested in hearing, you know, all 24 episodes and the crazy depth and details that are involved in this story, you can, of course, listen to Voices for Justice. That is my podcast that I produced about Alyssa. You can find it everywhere you find podcasts. And you can follow me on social media under Sarah E. Turney. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, of course, and everywhere else. So yeah. Follow me, listen to the podcast, and, you know, all I ask is to please share Alyssa's story. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for donations, nothing like that. All I need is for people to share it. The more people that share it, the more people see it, and the more pressure it puts on the decision makers in this case.
Absolutely. One quick thing. What is your past work experience? Because, you know, listen to your podcast, even since episode 1, has been outstanding. You know, it's top of the line, well done, in every aspect. So I'm just curious, did you have a background in media at all?
Not really. I have a background. I worked for USA Today, but I had nothing to do with their media side. I had a very long, wonderful career in events and marketing. So, yeah, I'm a very good marketer, but I had never touched audio before. That's something I never really did. So I learned all of that on the fly making the podcast. But thank you. Getting good audio quality was my top priority.
Did a great job.
Sounds great.
All right, Sarah, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Yes, thank you very, very much.
Of course. Thank you for having me on and sharing Alyssa's story.
Yeah, we wish you the best, and hopefully there will be some resolution to this story soon.
Oh, thank you. I hope so.
You have a good night, Sarah.
All right. You too.
All right, take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Just 3 days after recording this podcast with Sarah, she released this statement on her podcast, Voice for Justice.
I received a phone call today, about 20 minutes ago, from Detective William Anderson of the Phoenix Police Department, and he let me know that a warrant was issued for my father's arrest, and he is now in custody and being charged with the homicide of Alyssa. This moment feels so unreal. But I wanted to come on here and say thank you to all of you, to every single person that shared this story for so many years, for listening to this podcast. Without you guys, this would have never happened. Without your support, without making this podcast successful, without you liking on social media and sharing her story and keeping this pressure on, it would have never happened. You guys are all voices for justice, and that is all I ever wanted. I cannot thank you enough. I don't have all the details right now, but once I do, I will make a longer update. But I wanted to come on here and say thank you for being my family. And thank you for caring about Alyssa as much as I do. I couldn't have gotten through this without each and every one of you. I love you guys so much. This process has been absolute hell. Absolute hell. I never ever wanted to get on media. I never wanted to make my own podcast, but we did it, you guys. I don't know what comes next, but I'll definitely let you know as soon as I find out. But thank you, and I love you, and I'll talk to you next time.
We'd like to thank Sarah for joining us tonight and for sharing her story. If you have any information regarding this case, please reach out to the Arizona State Police at 602-223-2000. Thank you for joining us, and have a good night.
The search for 5-year-old Taylor Williams led investigators to Alabama this week.
So we have some breaking news from Florida. An arrest has been made in connection.
After years of agony, a glimmer of hope for the family.
Investigators spent hours searching through this house off Pennsylvania Avenue.
What could be a major development in the search for missing Alabama teenager.
Tonight, a stunning twist in the search for Taylor.
Somebody out there knows something.
They want to lay him to rest their way, not by somebody else's way.